Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the My Classic Live Hour. It is, what day is it today? It's the 14th of May, and I am live. If you can see and hear me, please give me a comment so I know that we are good. And and we'll get started here shortly. Today we're going to talk about keywords and things of that nature. I'm just going to take a few seconds to make sure everything is set up and working as it should be. I did have some internet gremlins a few minutes ago, so if you're seeing things that look strange, then please let me know if there's anything up with the stream. Otherwise, I think we should be rocking and rolling here shortly. Nancy says, all good, can see and hear you. Great. That is what we like. Okay. Ray says, all good. There's my beeper, so I know I'm here. Brent, hello. Audio sounds good. Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining me today. If you can't remember what happened last week or what followed from last week, I sent out a what do you call those things? Email, and asked you what you would like to see this week. So most people said they would like to see something about keywords and tags and stuff like that, or to put it another way, how to get our designs found and seen and hopefully purchased. And so that's what I'll talk about today. I've prepared a little presentation for you all. And I'm going to roll through that. But as per usual, I'm keeping an eye on the comments. So if you have any questions, you can fire away and ask me as I'm presenting, and I'll try and answer those as we go. I don't think I have any real housekeeping or anything to mention. I think if the stream drops, I do have a backup, so I should be back up shortly. But otherwise, let's get cracking, shall we? Let's get rocking and rolling into it. I basically designed this presentation to cover. It's kind of what would you call it? Keywords crash course or keywords and stuff 101. So whether I know a lot of people struggle with keywords and they struggle with the concept of keywords, and it trips people up. People obsess about it. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to have a better understanding of really what keywords are, why they're important, and how you can relax a bit more about them. So does that sound good to everybody? If so, I will begin. So where do I begin? Here we go. Okay, so first thing I think, most important thing to understand about keywords is they only matter for search, which is to say that there are other routes for you to sell your art that do not include or do not require search. For example, I was looking at my TeePublic analytics the other day. About half of those visits to my TeePublic store come from organic search, meaning they start on Google, they search for something, and they end up landing on my TeePublic account or one of my TeePublic designs from Google. Now that leaves another half of people who are on my TeePublic account any given month who have not come from Google, which means they have come some other route. Usually, I think most of those would have come from searching either on TeePublic, or they might have searched on TeePublic for something and then seen my design pop up somewhere else. So they might be looking at another design on TeePublic and seen my design beneath it or something like that. So that's a route where organic search doesn't necessarily matter for sales. There is such a thing as people browsing on websites like TeePublic, like Redbubble. There are also curated websites, so your Threadlesses and your T-Furies and stuff, where they select designs and promote them and market them, which of course don't require organic search to be any part of the chain of the sale. Someone doesn't have to search for that. They could simply have received an email from Threadless. There's your design. They like it. They go and buy it. So I just wanted to get that one out of the way, because I think people obsess about keywords and without realizing that there are many ways to sell designs that don't don't rely on keywords at all. So that's one thing. And here's an example of that. Um, Stephen Rhodes' Let's Summon Demons design, which I think is his best-selling design. I can't remember. I did interview him. There's an interview on my blog. Um, and I think it's probably his best-selling one. But this, of course, when he created this design, there was no one searching for Let's Summon Demons. There was no one searching for ironic children's literature, vintage children's book covers, and Satanism. You know, people weren't searching for that because the design didn't exist. But these days, now it's a popular design. There will be lots of people searching for Let's Summon Demons because they've seen the design, they like it, and they want to go and buy it. So there was no, when he created it, this is my point, there was no obvious keywords. I mean, how would you keyword a design like this? It's not immediately obvious. There's not an immediate niche or demand for it, but yet Stephen created it. He went out, and this design, or I should say his designs in general, are worth millions of dollars a year in retail, both online and brick and mortar. So keywords aren't everything. You know, there's I think there's a certain differentiation of skills between, like, sometimes the creative skills, the original skills, the things that are going to make you create something or going to help you create something that's truly original, are a completely different skill set to those that are going to be good at perhaps researching keywords and spotting opportunities. And sometimes, sometimes we overemphasize one at the expense of the other. And I think this is an example of where a design that doesn't require keywords to really work and to be successful, has proved itself and proved that concept. So now that we're through that bit, let's talk about what keywords are and why they matter. So if you are really struggling to understand keywords and to understand what keywords you might want to use for your designs, then it's usually a sign of a bigger problem, because it means you don't understand your design, you don't understand what your design is about, you don't understand its meaning, and you probably don't know your audience and you don't understand their motivations. And both of those are a problem. If you don't understand your audience, if you don't understand why they might want to buy this design, then it's going to be hard for you to describe it and to put relevant keywords in there that are going to be found. Now, this is the case. So if you're in this position, then hopefully this presentation will help you. I mean, it is fine to struggle with the odd design. I would say that of my usual design output, maybe 10 or 20% would be original designs for which I don't really have a clear picture of who's going to buy it. It's usually something that I just think is funny. I'd like to create it and put it out there. So if that's the case, that's fine. You know, I think that's okay if a small percentage of your designs fit that description. It's okay to struggle with that. But if you've got 80% of your designs that you're struggling with keywords, then it's probably a sign of a bigger problem. It's okay if you've got that 10 or 20%, because original work is part and parcel of what we're doing. Or certainly for my workflow, original designs, meaning designs that don't necessarily fit into a given niche already, or certainly not a very specific one, those are part of my brand, my style. That's part of what I do. So people do like crazy stuff. People do like weird stuff that doesn't exist yet. And people don't need to understand it or really know anything about it to make it something that people will buy. But in general, if you want to really try and reach people who are already searching for stuff, and you want to try and tap into existing markets, then you really should have a clear picture of keywords and what they do and how they work for your designs. And the third thing I would say is that it's important to understand the buyer's motivation for a purchase, and then describe the picture they have in their head. So let me illustrate this for you, because I think this will make it a bit easier. So here's a potential customer. Okay. Now this potential customer has had a flash of inspiration or motivation, you could call it, and they are now on the lookout for a particular design. So they've had some kind of motivation. Let's say they were watching YouTube and they saw one of their favorite YouTubers or celebrities wearing a particular t-shirt. And so it sparked this thing in their head, and they've now got this picture in their head of a particular t-shirt that they're looking for. So they've had their motivation. Now they have a picture in their head of what the t-shirt is that they're looking for. So then they're going to go and search for that, and then they're going to be presented with some results. So here's some, let's say these are like several different designs that they've landed on wherever, Redbubble or wherever it might be. On Google, it could be. So the customer started with this motivation. They then went and described what they were looking for using keywords. That's really what happened. This picture they have in their head, this this T-shirt image that's in their head, they had to distill it into words, and they had to pop it into Google or into Redbubble's search box to try and find what they were looking for. So that's what they did. They took their motivation, turned it into words, and they found some results. And obviously, over in the results side over here, this is where you want to be. You want to be one of these results, and you want to be a relevant result that kind of matches the picture they have in their head. But that's really more of a discussion about design rather than keywords. So let's keep ourselves on topic. So motivation, that's one of the important things. As an example, let's say the motivation was a birthday gift for let's say a niece or a nephew. So that's the inspiration. Little Johnny's birthday is coming up. I need to get him a gift. What can I get him? And they go over. So they've got this picture in their head, which is kind of vague because they don't really know exactly what to get him. So they go over to Amazon and they search for a 5-year-old boy's birthday T-shirt or something like that. So that's what they're going to search for, and then they're going to be presented with some results. So keywords are simply this. It's simply what someone searches for. And your job as a designer is simply to use the same words that your customer is using, or at least get as close as possible. So the design in their head, assuming you have a design that comes close to the design they have in their head, the picture they have in their head, then your job is to simply describe that using the same words they would. Now, when you put it like that, doesn't sound so bad, but of course there's lots of variations, there's lots of different ways of describing things. So how do you know what to use? How do you know what words to use? So hopefully I'll walk you through some of the steps I use to try and make that simpler. But as a big picture, this is really what you're doing. And I would say this is where the kind of rubber meets the road on keywords and stuff. If you understand the motivation behind someone's purchase or the desire to purchase, and you understand the ideal kind of keywords that they're going to use, then you're away, then you're golden, because everything else kind of just follows through after that. And that's why that's why it's so important, I should say, to understand your audience and to have a good picture of why you're creating the designs you're creating. The worst situation you could be in is to have a design that you barely understand and you have no idea who would buy that design. And therefore, you don't have any idea what kind of search terms there would be because you don't know who would buy it or what the motivation would be. The best situation to be in is you have a design, you understand exactly who the target market is, and you understand exactly what kind of words, or very close to what kind of words they would use to find that design. And that makes your job much easier going forward. Okay, so that is my big picture slide. This one might take a little bit of explaining, but this is a diagram that kind of shows how I think of broad competition and more specific kind of stuff. So if we, so this funnel represents broad kind of terms at the top. This would be broad keyword terms. So for example, things like Halloween t-shirt or Halloween t-shirts, something like that, very broad, where there is going to be lots of competition. There's going to be high volume of searches, meaning there's a lot of people looking for that kind of, there are a lot of people searching for that key term or key phrase any given month or any given day. And the terms are broad. So they're not specific. They're very broad terms like Halloween or funny Halloween or something like that. Now, as you come down the funnel, you would get to much more specific terms where there's less competition and less searches. So for example, in fact, I have some examples here. So right here at the top, you'd have like Halloween t-shirts. Then you'd have, if we get a little more specific, you would have something like Day of the Dead t-shirts. Maybe that's kind of you could call it a sub niche of Halloween or something. It's probably not as popular and as broad as Halloween, but it's still pretty broad. Then you could go one further. You could say, okay, maybe Sugar Skulls, maybe Sugar Skull t-shirt. That's a particular kind of type of design. And then you could have maybe Mexican Sugar Skull. So we're getting even more specific. And then finally, you could have something as specific as Blue Mexican Sugar Skull t-shirt. So that is right at the tip of this funnel. That's a very specific term. That is where buyers are much more sure of what they're looking for. The buyer knows exactly what they're looking for, and therefore it should be a relatively easy sale. So if you have created a blue Mexican sugar skull t-shirt design and you've uploaded it to Redbubble and you've called it Blue Mexican Sugar Skull, and there's a customer out there who has searched for Blue Mexican Sugar Skull, I'm going to get sick of saying Blue Mexican Sugar Skull, then you have easily connected the two parts of the jigsaw puzzle, and you should be looking at a relatively easy sale, assuming, as I have, that the competition's usually going to be less competitive down there. So so hopefully that kind of makes sense of kind of broad to specific. So up here, this is where buyers are less sure of what they're looking for. Let me just kind of illustrate this point. So if a buyer goes to Google and searches for funny Halloween t-shirts, they don't really know what they're looking for. They're looking to have a browse. They're looking to be presented with some options. But if a user searches for Blue Mexican Sugar Skull t-shirt, they have a much more specific idea of what they're looking for, and they don't really want to browse. They're less in the browsing mode. They're more in a finding mode. They're more in a, I want that one. Or if they're looking for a particular design, maybe a particular phrase on a t-shirt or something like that, then they're looking for a much more, they're not going to scroll through for hours. They want to find exactly a specific type of thing. So broad searches, this is where you don't really want to include these kind of things in your title necessarily, because it's probably going to be too broad, but you would want to include them in your tags and stuff like that. So maybe let's start the other way around. So for a design that's really specific, or that you understand that there might be a buyer who's looking for this specific design, then you would want to include that in your title. So the more specific you can be in your title, usually the better. And then as you get to these more broad terms like Sugar Skull t-shirt or Day of the Dead t-shirt, you would want to open it up and broaden it and include those in your descriptions. And then in your tags for things like Redbubble and TeePublic, you can go as broad as you like, and you can include really broad tags that would be Halloween, whatever, Halloween party, really broad stuff that's going to be high competition, because it really doesn't matter once you're down to that level. So I'll give you some examples here in a second, but does this diagram make sense? I know at first glance it looks kind of complicated, but it's pretty simple, really. The idea is when you're thinking about terms to use, you want to use the most specific terms in your title, and you want to use the broadest terms in your tags, and you kind of want to think of it that way. So what's the broadest possible, relevant term for this design, and what's the most specific, and then try and fill the gap between those. And as for where you'd put them, you'd put your most specific ones in your title, your broadest ones in your tags, and then kind of somewhere in between you'd include in your description or your bullets for merch and stuff like that. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me just see if there's any questions coming so far. So let me see here. Pierre has said, so perhaps about 3 descriptive words. It's much more, what's the word? It's much harder to define than that, Pierre, because it's going to really depend on the design. And I'll talk through some of that in a second here when I give some examples. Let me say as well, by the way, if you don't need to, I saw someone screenshot. Diane says she did a screenshot. You don't need to screenshot this, because I'm going to send this out in an email tomorrow or after the stream. As long as you're on my email newsletter list, you'll be able to get a copy of this as a PDF. I'm going to email this out. It's got links in it. It's got some useful stuff, so you can go and grab it. You'll get it later. Just make sure you're subscribed. You can go to michaelessick.com/subscribe if you are not already on my email list. So yeah, I was answering Pierre's question. So yeah, it's not about like how many words you use. It's more about, I would say, specificity. That's the word. Specificity versus broadness, I think. But I'll explain more as you bear with me here in a second. Scott says really good way to explain this. Thank you, Scott. Okay, and Edward has a question. What about t-shirt, tee? Yeah, I don't think I do cover that later, so let me just address that quickly. So most platforms, Redbubble, TeePublic, Merch by Amazon, they are going to take care of the t-shirt, tee bit for you, so you don't need to worry about that. Where you might want to worry about that is on a platform like Etsy, where of course they don't add things like that, so you have to define it. So typically, I would like to use a couple of variations there. So in my title, I would usually use T-shirt, as that's kind of the proper pronunciation. Um, and I would use T-shirt as you've written it in this comment, Edward, and T in my descriptions, and I would use sometimes those in my tags as well. So if I was doing a funny Halloween T-shirt, I might say in the description funny Halloween T-shirt with T-shirt altogether one word, and I might include a tag that is funny Halloween T-shirt altogether, not with a dash as well. So you could do things like that. I think I wouldn't get too obsessed about that. It's really not that important. Most search engines, Google, Etsy, and others, they're going to be able to read T-shirt in many different ways, and they're not going to really differentiate, so it won't make a big difference. But you can do that if you want to just kind of cover your back. Perpetual Motion says, thank you. I need a visual guide. Thank you. And Walter says, but is it still better than that the specific keywords are better as a long tail and the broad tags neat and on point? I'm not really sure I understand your question, Walter. Certainly better if your title is more specific, so more long tail, usually. That does kind of assume, though, that you're talking about something where there is less what do I mean? So if you've got a really specific title, sometimes there's a case to be made that your titles can be too specific, i.e., you go so specific that there's going to be very little competition, and therefore you're less likely to make a sale. In which case, you might want to include a couple of broader terms in your title where possible, because that's going to probably help you get a bit more traffic and not go too specific. However, it just depends on the design. Like if your design is something people are going to be searching for as a phrase, then it really helps to be specific. But if it's not something people are going to be searching for, and you're trying to get eyeballs from broader searches, then it does help to just throw a couple of broader terms in your title, and I'll explain that in a second and show what I usually do. Okay, so I think I've answered a couple of those questions. Let's crack on here. So keywords checklist. So once you've got your design done and you're trying to cover some keywords, I think it is helpful to think about the kind of keywords that you can include. And this is something I often miss and forget about. So I do think it's helpful to have something like this kind of keywords checklist to just kind of help you out. So these are the things I would always like to cover in my keywords where possible. So this is not necessarily things that are going to appear in the title. It's probably things that you want to cover in your description and in your tags. So these are some of those things. So for example, number one, describe the design. So for example, if this is an illustration of the Kanagawa wave, then you would want to include that somewhere in your keywords, in your description of your design. If this is a graphic showing Abraham Lincoln wearing sunglasses, then I would use that and describe it. So that's one thing. Just describe the elements of the design or say what the design is. That's kind of an obvious one. Most of us do that by default anyway. The phrase, this is another obvious one, but if your design is just here for the booze, then make sure you include that. That's kind of obvious. The style. So this is something I often kind of forget about, but what's the style of your design? Does it have an aesthetic or a style? For example, terms like vintage or retro or something like that. Could you include those? Only if they're relevant, but what is the style of your design? Or cartoon, things like that. Can you describe the design using a word like that? What is the topic or subject or niche? So this is where you're going to go to that kind of broader term that is likely to have more searches for it, more search volume, and is likely to be more competitive. But for example, things like a topic like biology or a subject, or a niche like hipster or vegan or something like that, those are the kind of things you would want to include there. Again, those are usually quite obvious to us, or they should be if you're creating designs that you understand. An event. So is there a particular event you can tie this to? Sometimes that's very obvious, like Halloween. Sometimes it's not so obvious, but you might be able to find something and include it there. I don't like usually doing the route of like including every event under the sun. Like this is a great T-shirt for Christmas, birthdays, la 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 la. But if there is a particular, event that it works for, then it makes sense to include it. Um, is there a particular thing, like is it a gift for someone, and is that gift tied to a particular event or something? So birthday, I don't know, baby shower, anniversary. These are all opportunities where you could include a gift-related keyword. And demographics. So, for example, is this designed for a girl or a boy, or a man or a woman, or a older person or a younger person? Whatever. There could be some demographics there that you could include as well. So that's a keyword checklist. Again, I'm going to email this out tomorrow, so you can have a copy of that keywords checklist to use. So here's an example of how I might apply the keywords checklist to this design that we did a couple of weeks ago, the Nobel Prize Wiener design. So describe the design. So you could say something like Wiener dog with a prize, something like that. That kind of describes exactly what is on the design. This is for someone who maybe, if you think about it as like a reverse Google search. So you know how sometimes you can type into Google like little green guy who talks backwards or something, and Google will say Yoda because it knows what you're searching for. So in the same way, you can think of that. Sometimes people can't remember the design that they're looking for, but they know how to, or they describe it with some related words. So for example, someone who saw this design may not remember the joke, but they might remember the picture, so they might try and describe it. So that's what we might do there. The phrase is obvious, Nobel Prize Wiener. The style, we could say cartoon. It's a cartoon style, or you could even say a comic style or something like that. Topic, so we could say Dachshunds or Wiener dogs or sausage dogs, something like that. The event, kind of reaching, but you could say for a dog show, could be for that. Gift, dog birthday, don't know, again, reaching a bit, but it could work for something like that. And then if we try and for demographic, couldn't really think of anything for that, so I'll leave that one. But this is how I would combine those all together. So those are our potential keywords. I would then usually try and fit all of those into a description. So my description might be something like Nobel Prize Wiener T-shirt. This funny Dachshund shirt features a cute cartoon prize-winning wiener dog. If you love Dachshunds and dog shows, then this is the T-shirt for you. Celebrate a dog birthday in style. So as you can see, what I've really just tried to do is work in all these keywords into a couple of sentences that make sense and don't sound too, spammy or scammy. But I think that kind of illustrates the point. So once you've got you've covered all your bases on your keywords, go and try and include those in your description. Obviously, you won't be able to fit these all in your title, nor would you want to usually. And I'll show you what I would use for the title in a second, but you would want to include those in your descriptions and in your tags as well. Okay, so this is the typical kind of setup of a listing. It's pretty similar across the board. So Merch by Amazon has a few quirks. TeePublic has quirks like TeePublic has a main tag, but they all have a title, a description, and tags. So, for example, with our design here, Nobel Prize Wiener, for the title, I would go with something like Nobel Prize Wiener Funny Dachshund T-shirt, something like that. So, I mean, I could spend hours maybe going and researching different search terms and key phrases and seeing which might be the best, phrases to target. But usually I would go something like that. So a very specific title for the start, Nobel Prize Wiener, and then a broader one to kind of finish off the title, Funny Dachshund T-shirt. So that's how I would approach it with something like Merch by Amazon. That would be my title. With TeePublic, if I go back a couple of steps, the title there would be Nobel Prize Wiener, and I would put something like Dachshund or maybe Funny Dachshund as the main tag, because that's something that TeePublic does. It kind of separates that out, but it's where they tell you to put the most specific but broad tag, and they're going to use that to help kind of rank your shirt. So that's what I do with TeePublic. The description we kind of covered already, but that's a broad one. And then my tags might be something like everything I said previously, but include some really broad stuff like Wiener, Nobel Prize, puppy, cute, funny, cartoon, sausage dog. Just kind of literally brain dump a load of stuff that may or may not be useful, but at least it kind of helps build that picture of what the design's about and what it's around. Okay, I think I'll pause it there and take a few questions here. Scott says the display 26 character limit in the title doesn't help with this. Yeah, obviously different platforms do have different ways of dealing with stuff. So if display has a very limited title, then you would of course need to weigh your options and try and think about the most appropriate there. So I think the real problem with titles is, do you go super specific or do you go broad? And the deciding factor is going to be, are people likely to be searching for this? And what's the competition levels like? Excuse me. So if the competition levels for the kind of design you're creating, if it's a funny Halloween t-shirt or funny Halloween design on display, for example, then if you call your design funny Halloween poster or something like that, it's going to be way too broad and you're just, it's too high competition. So you want to pick something more specific to your design. So that might be like funny pumpkin t-shirt, or you might want to go with whatever the funny phrase is or something, or cute cartoon pumpkin t-shirt or something like that. But on the other hand, if it's a phrase that people might be searching for example, I'm just here for the booze, you would want to include that in your title. So hope that makes sense. Guyan, should we mention t-shirt type like polo or round neck? If you're selling on somewhere like Etsy, then yes, you should describe the type of t-shirt. I mean, I usually just use t-shirt. That covers people looking for t-shirts. But if you're selling a polo, then you should use that. Or if it's a tank top, of course you should use that, or full sleeve or whatever, long sleeve, then use that. But that really only applies to platforms like Etsy, or if you are selling on Amazon directly, not via merch, because with merch and with Redbubble and with TeePublic, they're going to include all those on your behalf. Diane says, I always copy and paste title in my description. Am I just wasting space? No, I think that is a good practice. So if you'll see on this example here, in my description, I've repeated the title in my description. I always do that. I think it just helps to emphasize the title again. In your description or in your bullets, as this would be on merch by Amazon. So I would just repeat it. It just helps. And I think it helps to just say Nobel Prize winner t-shirt, just as one full phrase, just to emphasize it. So yeah, I don't think that's wasting space. I think in my experience, that's a helpful thing to do. Riker says, does the order in which you write down the keywords tags matter? Meaning more important keywords should go first. Usually, Riker, yes, that is the case. You would want your most important keywords to go first. But again, this comes back to the wrestling over the title. Is your most important keyword going to be Nobel Prize winner, or is it going to be funny Dashin t-shirt? I think if we're talking about what's the most relevant description for this design, then it's Nobel Prize winner. But if we're talking about what's going to get more searches, it's going to be funny Dashin t-shirt. So it's kind of up to you which way around you go. But I think most platforms, it's becoming less and less of an important thing. But in general, that is usually the case, that you would want your most important one to be first. But again, I wouldn't obsess too much about that. Reza, is it good to combine some keywords checklist? Not really sure what you mean, Reza. Hopefully you've seen me just run through that, and I do combine all the keywords together. So hopefully you kind of understand what I would do. Scott, wouldn't demographic be wiener lovers? Yeah, could be. You could include that. I would say wiener lovers might be more of a niche than a demographic. To me, demographics means, or the way I'm using it, means things like ages, genders, things like that, locations. Those are the kind of things. Robin, are we allowed to say shirt and this t-shirt in Amazon merch descriptions? You are discouraged from doing so, I believe, Robin, but it's not prohibited. It's just that they recommend you don't do that because they're using your description on tank tops and on all other stuff as well. So it's up to you. I still have plenty of of designs where it says t-shirt in the descriptions. And because t-shirt is the most popular search term, it doesn't tend to be a problem in my experience. Ron says, won't Amazon reject you? I don't think they reject you. I think they just discourage it. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I uploaded some stuff to merch. Scott, yes, I could do much better than I have so far. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's crack on then, because we've got a couple more things to cover, and then I'll take a load of questions before we wrap it up. So there's a rough example of what I would typically do. My guess is that doesn't vary too much from what most people are doing. I think it's pretty simple, straightforward stuff. But just to try and emphasize some of my recommendations, I would use the most relevant keywords for your design in the title. So whatever is most appropriate, most relevant, stick those in the title. And then you want to repeat those keywords, those key phrases everywhere. So of course they're going to be in the title. They should also be in your description. You should also include them in your tags as well. So just everywhere you can, use the most relevant keywords. So if we're trying to rank for Nobel Prize Wiener t-shirt, then that should be the title. It should be in the description. I would also have a tag that was Nobel Prize Wiener, all as one phrase. Cover the broader terms in your descriptions. So if there's terms that you don't or can't get in your title, then use them in your descriptions, and cover the broadest possible terms in your tags. So that's where you feel free to go crazy and wild. And if you try to rank for stuff that is going to be very high competition, whatever that might be, Halloween, July the 4th, whatever, you include those in your tags. And that's stuff that might be difficult to work into a sentence as well. So if it's stuff that's really, really broad, then you might want to just stick it in your tags, not worry too much about getting it in your descriptions. So hope that helps. Again, if you are subscribed to my newsletter, you'll get a copy of all this tomorrow. So don't worry about missing out on any of it, because you'll get it later. So I just thought I'd share as well a rough roadmap for how I usually approach stuff. So if you think back to the example I gave of the little guy with his motivation and his picture in his head of his t-shirt, so I would say I usually start with something like that. Like I have a bit of insight or motivation to create a design. I then design that with that motivation as my brief. So I think about maybe that picture that someone might have in their head, and then I create that design. And then I give it a relevant, appropriate title to the best of my ability. And then I would go and have a look and see if there's any low-hanging fruit that I can find. So low-hanging fruit would be things like variations or related words or phrases. We've just got a wonderful example, I think, here provided by Susan, who says, look up terms for your niche too. Like dachshunds are affectionately known as doxies. So I didn't know that. So that would be a wonderful thing to include in my description or in my tags. And that would, hopefully I would find that by going and searching for things like variations and doing a bit of research. So this would be my typical kind of roadmap. I'd create the design first. I'd then go and do some research after that, and then I'd include those relevant terms, as long as they're relevant, in my tags and in my descriptions, and if my title, if I thought it was appropriate to do so. So a little bit on that, examples of things to check, variations and alternatives. So this can cover a broad range. Like obviously there's things like synonyms, as in words that mean the same thing. So for dachshunds, we've got things like sausage dog, doxies apparently, and wiener dogs. So there's like 4 or 5 different terms there for one thing. So it would be good to cover those. One thing that's kind of relevant with Google especially is Google has this thing about LSI keywords, they call them, which is words that are around the same kind of word. And when you have lots of words on a web page that are around this particular word and that are relevant to it, it tells Google more about what that's about. So the more broad terms you have, the better it's likely to be for your ranking in Google. So, for example, if you have a design that's just about a dachshund, or for example, our Nobel Prize wiener, if all we said was dachshund, dachshund, dachshund all over the page, and we never used other terms, we never said wiener, we never said sausage dog, we never said doxy or anything like this, then Google, it may or may not appreciate that. Whereas if we have a page where we used all those terms, where we said sausage dog, wiener dog, all these different terms, then it tells Google, okay, this page is something to do with Dachshunds and wiener dogs, and it's definitely about that. So the more kind of relevant terms you use that mean similar things, that can help you rank in Google as well. So that's one way of looking at variations. Another way is like there are different ways of writing things, like COVID-19 could be COVID-19, it could be COVID-19 all one word, it could be COVID space 19, and then you've got variations like coronavirus or whatever, or I don't know what the SARS-2, whatever it is. So those are some things to check, those kind of approaches. Plurals are always useful. Like often people, especially for broad search terms, they will not use the singular, they'll use the plural. So they'll search for Dachshunds t-shirt or cookies t-shirts or whatever. They won't say cookie, they'll say cookies. So you might want to use the plural instead of the singular. Abbreviations could be another thing to include and check for. Are there any abbreviations that you might be missing out on? These could be, again, low-hanging fruit that you could include. Related words. So what I just kind of described there about Google and this LSI concept, I've included a link here. Again, you can get this in the PDF that I send out tomorrow. But that article just kind of explains that in more detail, and I think it's pretty useful. And of course, check your spelling. There has been many an occasion where I have rushed into getting a design out and misspelled a keyword, which obviously is not a good idea. So always check that if you can. And numbers versus words. So if there's some kind of number you're included, for example, if this is a birthday shirt for a particular birthday, you might want to use the word 5 for 5-year-old, or you might want to also write the word fifth, Fit, whatever it is, however you spell it, write the number out as well like that. So those are some examples of other things you might want to check. Where you can check these, my go-to would be Google, and then you can also search on Amazon. You could search on Amazon for something like Dachshund t-shirt and see if there are any low-hanging fruit keywords and key phrases there that you could use as well. And usually this is going to be really obvious. Like you'll know at a glance whether whatever doxy is a term you should use or something like that. And you'll see terms like dog and think that's broad, so I'm not going to use it. So, it's pretty obvious, usually, those kind of things. Okay, I do have a couple of last-minute tips, but that's pretty much the bulk of my thing. So I'll start taking some questions here in a second. A couple of tips. You can use you can, of course, there's nothing stopping you from taking a design and listing that design a couple of times using different combinations of keywords or using a different title for each one, varying the order of things in your title, just to try and do a bit of experimenting yourself and seeing what kind of, if you can discern any pattern. I can't say that I've really done this to any great extent because typically I'm more focused on getting a lot of designs out there, and I'm not really too worried and too interested in digging deep into the algorithms of various platforms. But that is certainly something, there's nothing stopping you from varying it, especially if you have a couple of key phrases and you're not sure which one would be the most appropriate to use, then that can be helpful. If you're doing designs where you're doing series of similar designs, then it really helps and saves time if you save those tags for use later on. So save them somewhere, whether that's in a Google spreadsheet or whatever, so that you can simply copy and paste them again and use them again and just add a couple of different ones, if you want. So if you're doing a load of dog Dachshund related designs, you don't have to type out Dachshund wiener dog, every time you do that. You can just copy and paste your collection of useful tags. For long phrases, so when there's, say it's a phrase-based or text-based design and you're using a particular, and that's the design, but it's maybe too much to fit in the title, then you could abbreviate it, so the most important words, that's one way you could look at it, or you could just kind of include it until you run out of space and then just make sure that you get the full phrase in the description. When people are searching for specific phrases on t-shirts, they're usually not going to type the whole thing out. They're usually going to start typing it and they're going to hope that Amazon's going to fill it in for them or that Google's going to fill it in for them. And then they're going to find what they're looking for. So if you can't fit the whole phrase in the title, then you could leave out like words that aren't as important, like your ands, your ors, your thus, those kind of things. Or you could simply, type the start of it and then leave the rest for the description. Okay, couple of resources for you as well. I think it is helpful if you are trying to, reach people via organic search. What you are doing is search engine optimization. So it's good to understand the concept of search engine optimization and some of the fundamentals, and the principles there that really play a part in getting things ranked and getting things ranking. And Google is the canary in the coal mine, if you like, of search engine optimization. But what I mean by that is that the problems and the things that Google addresses now are usually what Amazon and Redbubble and others address in a couple of years' time. So, for example, auto suggesting started on Google. Now it's a feature on Amazon and Redbubble and almost everywhere. Things like "did you mean?" So if you type something wrong, you misspell something on Google, Google says, are you sure you meant that? Did you mean this? And that's now on Amazon. So Google's usually the first with this stuff. And so my recommendation is just that you kind of, if you don't really have an understanding of SEO, even a basic understanding of it, then go and just spend some time learning about it. And one good resource is the Ahrefs YouTube channel. Ahrefs is a software platform. It's not important, but they have a very good YouTube channel where they put out a lot of free information about SEO, and you can really learn a lot from there about some of the key principles and stuff. So I've got a link there to that. There's also a couple of extensions, free Chrome extensions. One of them is called Keyword Surfer, and I'll just let me just get rid of this a second. I'll just show you exactly what that does right here. So if you go to Google, so let's say we were looking for Dachshunds. We did a search on Google for Dachshund dog. So the two Chrome extensions, one of them is called Keyword Surfer. And you can see here what Keyword Surfer is it shows you some related keywords or keyword ideas. If I just zoom in a bit here, this might be a bit easier to see. So here's Keyword Surfer. So it's suggesting other keyword phrases. So, and it's also telling me, estimating what the volume of those is. So it kind of shows you the popularity. So Dachshund, Dachshund Pup, Dash Puppies, Wiener Dogs, Dachshund Puppy. And then if I scroll down here a bit, we also have here, this is the other Chrome extension called Keywords Everywhere. And this is just going to load a load of other related phrases as well. So these are both really useful when you're looking for low-hanging fruit for other words to include, and also to give you a kind of a picture of what, if I extend this a little bit, of what the popularity of those is. So if we did something like, let's do a search for funny Dachshund. So, so just a cursory glance here, we can see like Dachshund memes gets about 1,600 searches a month. So that would be something we could include, because we've got a design that's about a dog. It's could count as a meme. It's kind of relevant as that. It's a funny Dachshund related image. Therefore, we could say something like Nobel Prize winner Dachshund, funny Dachshund meme T-shirt or something like that. So we could include that. So that's a use case for something like Keyword Surfer and Keywords Everywhere. They're both free, recommended as an easy way to find useful keywords and stuff. Okay, let me take some questions, and we've got about 10 minutes left. So anything that I didn't cover there or that you want me to address, go ahead and ask. Okay. That was Susan's. We answered that one. Jennifer says, do you happen to know if Amazon will smack you if you do multiple titles with the same design? I think as long as you don't go overboard, Jennifer, I think that should be fine. But By overboard, I mean like hundreds of the same title would be a bit weird. But as long as you were doing, you keeping it to 5, to, I don't know, several, something like that. But I'm not sure why you'd want to do multiple titles. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure why. Yeah, sorry, I thought you were doing the same title on different designs. If you've got the same design with multiple titles, I don't think that's likely to be a problem at all. Again, don't go overboard, but I don't think that would cause any issues. Steve says, do you do this all yourself, or do you have an assistant that does it for you? I do the keyword stuff usually myself. And following this kind of rough roadmap example, um, it's really quite easy. It doesn't take that long at all. This is my typical kind of workflow. So I'd have the design already. Then I would go and, I'd give it a title because I know what the title should be, usually. And then I would go and find, some other relevant phrases. And it's not that hard because I know, there's a lot of, when you look at this, there's a lot of stuff we've covered there. It can seem like a minefield. The important thing to remember is this: you are trying to connect with a customer. You're trying to connect with a customer. There they are. You're trying to connect with that customer and get them what they're looking for. That's really all it is. And you don't have to go searching and digging for keywords. I very rarely actually do too much research on keywords at all because I know what I've created and I know what the key terms are likely to be. Now, granted, I may not know that there's, several minor variations of phrases that they might use, which may have got me a tiny bit more traffic. But in general, I know the big ones. And as long as you get the big rocks in, then the little rocks are much less important. So it can seem like a lot, but I think once you understand this overarching principle that you're just trying to get you're trying to help someone find what they're looking for, then it becomes relatively obvious, how to use key terms that they're gonna use, because most people are not going to use really long tail tiny niches. They are going to use pretty broadish terms for what they're looking for, or quite specific terms. So it's not hard to understand or guess what they're going to use. You don't have to do really specific stuff. Okay. Scott, have you any thoughts about abstract works? I know they aren't much chop for t-shirts anyway. Yeah, Scott, I mean, it's not that you can't sell abstract stuff as t-shirts, it's that it's very hard to sell them organically, because what do people search for and how do you connect them? I mean, if you can join those dots, if you can put those two jigsaw pieces together, then you can. But if it's like anything, if there's not a market for the thing, then it's going to be very hard to sell. And even if there is a market for the thing, it may simply be that the market doesn't really exist in the organic space. It may be that if you're creating abstract aesthetic based designs, you would be much better going down a route of offline licensing, or trying to get in with a particular marketplace or a particular retail store to sell your designs that way, or to build your own brand and really sell to people that way, because it's not something that people are searching for. But people buy stuff that they don't search for every day. That people show it to them. A friend shows it to them. They see it on YouTube. They see it on TV. They whatever it might be. There's loads of stuff where people don't necessarily start with or end with a search, but they still will go and buy that thing if they've seen it and they're given a link to it or whatever. So there's lots of different ways to sell stuff. You don't have to obsess about keywords, and I do not obsess about keywords at all. I think of it as, that's why it's like the last thing on the list. I don't like the itchy feeling that there's some obvious keywords that I might have missed that could take me 10 minutes to do a little bit of research, throw them in on the tags and in the description, and it could have made a bit of an impact. I don't like feeling that I've missed out on stuff, but at the same time, I recognize that it's very unlikely that there's going to be a keyword or two that are going to transform my design from selling once a month to selling 100 times a month, simply because I whacked this keyword in. I just don't think that's really likely at all. Ray says, "Is it good practice to use the suggested tags in TeePublic?" Yeah, I think they can be helpful, Ray. That's just another handy, handy step that they provide for you. But still, the title would be the more important thing, and the tags are still just kind of a helpful cushion of relevant keywords, if that makes sense. But there's certainly nothing wrong with using those. I like to see TeePublic suggest stuff. I mean, if TeePublic are suggesting stuff, it's usually because other people have used them in their design. So yeah, it can be helpful. Lester, are titles more important than tags? Yes, titles are always more important than tags in TeePublic or anywhere. The title is always going to be the most important thing. The tags are going to be the least important thing. So you always want to make sure you get your most important phrases and keywords in the title. Key link. Not sure what you mean by that, Kay. If you can ask your question again. Chris. Chris says, Michael, do you have any stats about designs with text only versus image with text? No, I do not. And I don't have any stats, certainly. I think the distinction of text versus image with text is a not a very helpful one, because it doesn't, I wouldn't break things down. It's like asking what sells better, black t-shirts or blue t-shirts or something like that. The market for black t-shirts and blue t-shirts is so massive that it's why even ask the question? A much more I'm not giving a very good answer, but my point is that I wouldn't worry about text only versus image with text. I would worry about getting a design in front of a customer that is meeting their needs and that they want to buy. And the more you understand your customer and you understand their motivation, the better and easier it will be to create that design, whether that design is text only or not. There are problems with text only, like it's very easy to be copied. It's hard to protect that design with copyright protection. But in general, I think it's not a helpful distinction. Really, it doesn't mean anything. Walter, I heard someone say that he also does keywords himself because assistants sometimes don't know local copyright brand terms to avoid strikes and problems. Yeah, that's something to consider. Of course, is you don't want to use any copyrighted stuff. But usually, usually that's not a problem. Most of us can recognize that. So yeah, oftentimes it can be a good idea to do it yourself rather than outsource it. Scott says thanks, and Reza says after the live is over, can we have your slides? Yes, if you follow the link down here, michaelessick.com/subscribe, you will get a copy of this as a PDF tomorrow or later today, depending on how quickly I can get it out. But yeah, if you're subscribed and you're on my email newsletter, you will receive it. Okay, I think I've answered everyone's questions. If I haven't, I'll give you a couple of minutes to post it. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up. So yeah, I hope that's been helpful. Like, the more I went through it, the more I kind of realized that there's quite a lot to it. But if I could leave you with anything, it would simply be that keywords are obvious most of the time, and it's really just a case of using the most appropriate relevant phrase for your design, and really a lot of common sense, which I understand is people don't like that as an answer because people like to have very specific steps to follow. But in my case, I think that's the case. If I create a design, I'm going to title it the most relevant, descriptive way I can, and I'm going to include some relevant, similar alternatives, variations, synonyms and stuff in the description and in the tags, just to try and help boost it. But I'm not going to obsess about it. I'm not usually going to play around and change titles regularly. I'm just going to do the best I can and move on to the next design and just keep creating stuff. Okay. Gary says, hi, if you are building your own brand but selling over multiple platforms, I'm presuming you would use the name of your brand in keywords and tags. Yeah, certainly if you're trying to build a brand, Gary, and that's kind of something you're trying to drive people back to your brand or find or you think people might be searching for your brand, then certainly. But honestly, that's not something I've usually done, except in specific situations where maybe I have a series that has a particular name or something. But yeah, certainly it's not going to hurt. It's probably a helpful thing to do. And then if you trademark your brand and people steal your tags, then you can very easily identify them and get them taken down. Scott says, "Oh, we don't have common sense." Yeah, most of us do or don't. A lot of people don't. But the more you know about your customer, the less common sense you need. Chris says, "Looking forward to your TeePublic guide. When will it come?" Yes, Chris, it is still in the works. Sorry, I did say this week, and I'm going to try and work on it tonight to get it out tomorrow, at least in a very early. It might be a shortened version, but I'll get something out tomorrow. How's that for a promise? Angie says, "Thank you." Lester says, "Is it okay to use templates for descriptions and just swap out the niche?" Yeah, that can work, and I've done that for a lot of my designs, Lester. You can, replace this word, but it all forms a sentence. If you like X, then this is a great X t-shirt for you, perfect for X lovers and fans of X. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. James says, "Common sense, it seems collectively we don't have enough of it." But you only need a little bit to make a good an impact, James. You only need a little bit of common sense. You only need a smidgen more common sense than the next guy. B&A, do you sell on Teespring at all? What are your thoughts about Teespring? Not really, B&A. We have multiple Teespring accounts from back in the day, but they make very little sales because Teespring is not great for organic traffic at all. Much better putting your time and your energy into Redbubble, TeePublic, and others like that. I would check out the blog post on my website, michaelessick.com, best POD sites 2020. Teespring is mentioned on there, but it's not really the best for organic driven searches and purchases. Angie, how much does it cost to trademark something? It's about a couple of $100, I think, something like that. So not something you want to do out of the bat, but out of the bat, that's COVID-19. Like a idea for a t-shirt there. Like a hell out of bat. Not something you want to do immediately because it costs a bit of money, but something you can do once you have maybe a brand that is actually worth something and that you think it's going to be worth doing. James says $275 per class. So there you go. In the UK, I think it's about 200 quid or something like that. So yeah, it's around that kind of mark. Nikki, are there free templates or sajablones for quotes on t-shirts? Not sure what you really mean there, Nikki. Free templates for quotes? There probably are, I guess, out there, but if you're doing quotes, then you can obviously just type out the design, so you really don't need a template for that, unless I've really misunderstood your question, in which case I apologize. Right, I think I'm up to date with questions. I think we'll leave it there unless anyone has any last minute ones, but I think we'll wrap it up. So once again, if you want to get this PDF slides, keywords and stuff 101, I'll send this out later with all links and stuff, and you'll be able to access that and save it and print things off and couple of last minute ones here. Ray, do you use Placeit mockups? Yes, Ray, we use them on Etsy and other platforms like that. One thing I would stay away from though with Placeit, so a couple of things actually. I went to cancel Placeit because I thought it was too expensive and they offered me like half price or something, but you don't get the t-shirt templates or the logos or anything like that, which is fine because I never use any of that stuff. And I don't really recommend that anyone else does either, because if you're using templates like that everyone else can use, then guess what? Everyone else is using them too. So your work is no longer original. You can't really stand behind it and license it in offline situations or anything like that. So yeah, I would recommend Placeit for the mockups because they do nice mockups which are handy to use. But I would never use their templates. I would never use their logos and stuff because Why would you need to do that if you're creating original designs that you want to make long-term income from? Then you want your stuff to be original, and you don't want to be using stuff that everyone else can use or illustrations that everyone else can use. It's the same reason why I don't use vector packs or anything from anyone, because um, you know, not only is there potential for copyright issues down the line, but mainly because other people can use them, and it means that you're not original, you don't stand out in the marketplace. Guyan says, what is the best platform to sell t-shirts? Depends what you mean by platform, Guyan, but if you mean marketplace website where it's free to upload and they're going to do everything for you, then Merch by Amazon, then Redbubble, then TeePublic, then Society6, and then starts to trail off a bit. But if you go to michaelessick.com, click on the first blog post there, you'll find my full rundown of all that stuff. Okay, Scott says thanks. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, BNA. Thank you, Angie. Best platform to start for beginners. For beginners, I would start with Merch by Amazon, Redbubble, and TeePublic. Merch by Amazon is a invite-only process, so you'd probably be best off starting with Redbubble. That's where I started. Another good place to start, which most people don't think of, is Shirt a Day websites, where you submit your design, and if it gets selected, they sell it for 24 hours. So sites like T-Fury, Ripped, Shirt Punch, other tees. There's a list of them which you can access via my website. But again, on that same blog post, let me just navigate to it so I'm making myself clear. If you go to this one here and you scroll down to this little box and you put your email in there, then I'll give you access to an Airtable base, which includes a massive list of t-shirt websites you can submit to. And a lot of those are Shirt a Day websites, which I think is a great place for beginners to start, because it's a good test of your design quality, how good your designs are. And it means that if you get designs selected, it means you know that your quality is good enough, and that you know you're hitting the right mark. And you also don't need to worry about keywords and stuff, because it's all through promotions and stuff that they themselves run, so you don't have to worry about keywords and stuff. Okay, hope that answers that one. Anna, this blog post is what you probably want to look at. Ray says he pays $12 for Placeit. Yeah, I think I pay something like that, maybe a little less. Don't know why. Lester, what's the best way to market your TeePublic store if it's not niche specific? I don't know. That's a really hard question, Lester. If you've got a general store, then you can't really market it. You would have to market. You can market designs, but you can't really market your store if it's not niche specific, because who are you targeting? You need to have someone to target. If you don't have someone to target, then you can't market to them almost by definition. So I think you'd need to rethink, either rethink that, or you would need to just create. You could, for example, I mean, I have a pretty general store on TeePublic. It's kind of a general pop culture designs, but they are close enough linked that I can market not my TeePublic store, but a Shopify store based on those designs, and I know kind of the demographic I'm after. So, if you can't define your audience, if you can't define the people you're trying to reach, then you're going to struggle. And if you can, then you should have some ideas for how to market to them. Ray says, sunny again here in Cheshire. Yes, it is indeed, Ray. I'm about to try and set up a tree swing in my garden for my children after we're done here. So that'll be nice. Eileen says, so for brand you design yourself from scratch? I don't understand the question, Eileen. If you can clarify, I will try to take that one again just before we wrap it up. Janelle says, love this session on keywords. They have always made me crazy. Now maybe not so much. Good. Thank you, Janelle. I hope so. That was my intention. The more I got through the session, the more I felt like I was making things more complicated. But hopefully that's things have cleared up a little bit for people. And yeah, we've kind of cleared a bit of the cobwebs away and made it a little more easy to understand. Okay, I think we will wrap it up there. We've gone over by about 10 minutes. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already, and I will send out an email either later on today or tomorrow. I will include a feedback and suggestions form there for what you'd like to see me do next week. I'm thinking that next week we might do some design critiques slash take someone's design and redesign it to make it better. I think that's something that might be helpful. I've done it a few times before and people seem to like it. So if that's something that you'd like to see, obviously I'll include that on the form, but it's going to be up to you guys. You get to choose what we do next week. So I'll send that out later and leave it in your hands. Eileen says, you mentioned that you don't use templates for your own brand. Is it best to design yourself? Yes, certainly it is all 100% best to design everything yourself if you're trying to build a long-term business from your art. If you don't design everything yourself, you're just, you're at danger, you're at certain risks, and you're limiting certain opportunities in the future. For example, if you are I did have a great example. Okay, so yesterday, I will finish with this illustration of what I mean. Yesterday, I got an email from Threadless saying that they wanted to license a series of my designs, about 12 designs, which were all part of a collection of designs, to Spencer's, the it's like a gift store, I think, in the States. So this is a brick and mortar licensing opportunity that has come because I uploaded these designs to Threadless. Threadless has certain relationships with people like Hot Topic and Spencer's and others. So they reached out and said, Spencer's likes these designs. They want to license them. And yeah, so it's a collection of these designs. They're all very similar. They kind of make sense as a unit, a collection. And all those designs obviously were completely original. I designed everything. They were my ideas. They were our original illustrations, just 100% mine. Now, as part of that agreement, if I want to get these designs licensed and selling in Spencer's, I have to sign not a big, but a contract that says, one of the things it says is I will indemnify Threadless and Spencer's if any of this artwork is not mine. So what that means is if anyone came with a lawsuit saying that, hey, that's my template, or I designed that, or that's a bit of my artwork that you've used, or something like that, then, and if they sued Threadless or they sued Spencer's, then I would be on the hook for any damages. So I have to be 100% sure that everything in my designs is all mine. I created it. Someone else isn't going to have something very similar because it's my design. So that's just one way in which, if you use templates, if you use vector packs and stuff, that's why I'm extra wary of stuff like that, because I know that I want to license stuff offline and things, and I know that I'm going to have to tick a box that says this is all my work. So that's just one reason I don't use templates and stuff in my business, because that's my model. Is I want to maximize my opportunities. I don't want to limit myself to just selling and competing online with everybody else, if that makes sense. Nikki, I am new to this business. I mean, there are ready-made text designs where you can type your text, for example, like the nicest grandpa in the world. Not that I like that, but I want to make some text shirts. I am an illustrator and always make laborious designs, and that takes a lot of time. So yeah, you can use those kind of templates, Nikki, but everything I just said applies to that as well. Like, you're probably going to end up with a lot of designs that look a lot like everyone else's designs. So just use them wisely and understand where and why you're using them. Like, there's nothing wrong with creating designs that are going to compete on big print on demand platforms, but just realize that they're probably not necessarily then going to be applicable to other uses offline or I don't know, higher end stores or something like that, if that makes sense. Keep taking more questions now, but I will get through these. Lester, can you sign up for more than one TeePublic store with the same bank account? Pass. Don't know. Lester, sorry. You could ask TeePublic that question, or you could try and see what happens. Or you could have one with a PayPal account and one with a Payoneer account. I think the PayPal linking in TeePublic is just an email address, and you can have multiple email addresses linked to one PayPal account, so you could try that route. Nikki, I already have my answer. Design everything yourself. Yeah, that's the safest bet, Nikki. Nikki says, I put my name on the cartoons. Is that okay? Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I would always like to keep it a minimal part so it's not distracting from the design, but that's cool. James says you'll also take out your own insurance too. Yes, I do have some business insurance as well. Thaddeus, how many styles do you have at your designs? Oh, that's a crazy amount of styles, a lot of different styles. Yeah, different styles for different designs because they serve different purposes and different markets and different customers. So the style must match the needs of the customer. Thaddeus, hope that helps you. All right, guys, I'm going to close it out there before any more questions come in. Hope that was helpful. Covered a lot of ground. Sign up at michaelessick.com/subscribe to get your free PDF by tomorrow. And let me know what you want me to cover next week when I send out the feedback in the email as well. And yeah, thanks for joining me today. It was fun covering that. Enjoyed answering your questions. And I hope it helps you conquer the monster that is keywords. Hope you're a little less afraid and you're not worried about the keywords under the bed when you go to sleep tonight or hiding in the closet. Okay, have a great one. Have a great rest of your day. Have a good weekend. Stay safe until next week. Thank you, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.